Now, your people may look great on paper. They might have great qualifications, credentials, years of experience. But are they truly moving the needle for your business? That's the question. Well, this is Workplace Whispers with the MD CEO of Strategic Outsourcing Limited, Dr. Olufemi Ogunlowo. And joining us is Emmanuel Olaegbe, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer at Global Quality Support Services Limited. And today we are unpacking how companies can move from hiring for potential to actually building high-performance teams that drive real impact within the organization. Well, my name is Praise Mba, and you're welcome to join us on Workplace Whispers.
All right, thanks, Chris, and thank you for joining us today.
It's indeed a privilege, an opportunity for me to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. I think we'll just go straight into it.
Okay.
Straight into it is this. We keep hearing, high performance teams, across different organizations. But really, when it comes to building high performance teams, what's one big mistake that organizations make across board?
I think my own view is the first is not aligning strategic objective in terms of what the organization truly wants to achieve with that position, with the job role. So most times the job role is defined based on tactical expectations and not the strategic importance of that role, which will then help in identifying the specific metrics that can allow you to have measurable indicators towards achieving the success. Because at the end of the day, the role of people is to get things done. And to get things done to move you towards achieving or attaining the goal of the organization, even starting from the security man at the door.
Yes.
How have you defined the role of the guard? Has it been defined along even customer experience? Has it been defined along protection? Or it has just been gate opening and things like that? So if we don't start from the strategic importance and understanding the strategic trust and then use that to define the job description, which then enables us to determine the requirements for that job, then we are setting ourselves up to fail.
Okay, I think I also align with what Doctor has said. I would say that just like what he has said, is that a lot of organizations are not strategic about their hiring. And when you talk about that, I see a lot of people crafting a lot of vision, mission, and the rest of it. But I do not see them really place emphasis on then who are the kind of people who want to bring on board that can really help us achieve this vision and mission. And then at that point, it becomes extremely very important you set your recruitment parameters to be able to extract those kind of people. But what you find in most organizations is that we do not really pay attention to that. Then we bring in people and ultimately we do not get the kind of result we want. So for instance, what kind of people you want to bring that are culturally fit to your organization? Then you begin to talk to people. You can then have your recruitment, your whatever parameters, methodology to now be able to extract those kind of people into your organization. And he also mentioned something very critical. Eventually, when you bring in people, do you actually clearly set out the expectations from that role? And because sometimes we bring in people and sincerely they don't know what the job expects from them. From that point on, if you don't do that, obviously there's something obviously missing. So I think I also want to align with him and think that people should be very strategic in their hiring so that they can align it with their organizational goals.
And before we move on to any other thing, let's even just step back and take the role of the security guard as an example, because we talk about high performing teams, but in many organizations the gatekeeper is the first experience that any customer will have, especially we talk about customers who have point of sales in their premises. And if we take that as an example, in your experience over the years, have you truly seen any organization that has defined the role of a guard around customer experience? That says, okay, we are bank A, bank B, or we are supermarket this and that or whatever, and this role, which is uniform to guard, is strategic to us because this is the first experience. So we don't want our guards to be loitering around the customer when he's going into the car, good afternoon, sir, and all of those kind of things. Or we don't want our guards to not see themselves as the first customer service officer welcoming the client into our premises and, helping them to settle where to park and all of those kind of things. And even though we're talking about high performance, most times we would think it has to be very high level roles within the organization. From every job contributes to the success of the organization. So if we're talking about high performance team, is the entire organization that has to be high performing for you to have a high performing organization. So it's not a subset. It's not a selection of, these particular roles are the roles where we want the best talents or etc. To be able to achieve any success. Or as another example, and I want us to actually, have a conversation around this. Let's take the person that is behind the till in the supermarket and the security guard. Should they be high performance staff?
Yes, they should.
Exactly.
And every employee, just like you have said, should be considered a part of the total performance of the organization. And then you definitely has to be very deliberate in trying to ensure that, just like Doctor have said, from the man at the gate man. I think I particularly remember a particular bank. I won't want to mention their name. That I think they're doing a good job at that. Their security guards are extremely very customer centric. They welcome you very well. They try to be of help as much as possible. And so I'm just thinking of what you're talking about. I was trying to think about all the banks and the experience I've had. And I know there's one particular
Maybe the
bank.
ones around the ATM. The ones around the ATMs typically try to defend you. Not because they have to secure, but because maybe after you have drawn something on your way out,
No, I think this particular bank, I think it goes beyond that. Okay. Because I've had experience whereby even when they open the doors for you and you go into the banking and you have a few of them there, I know they go out of their way to ensure that, look, how can I be of help and all that. And I found that really very interesting to buttress what you're saying, which is extremely very important. So that in the terms of managing people, we do not just restrict it to a particular set of roles. From what Doctor is saying, it has to be a total comprehensive staff levels in the organization.
Organizations today, do we see them take this extra care when it comes to even hiring guards, security, like we've said? Because we see the top management level going for leadership trainings, communication trainings. Do we have such in organizations today?
I think there is a big gap in that area. And then you see the value chain from the lowest to the toppest kind of employee. Then your focus will not just be on the leadership. Your focus will be on how do I get every member of my team to have the same level of basic qualities that can drive my vision. Because if you don't have that, which is one of the things, I think a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time in doing that. So I tell people, entrepreneurs, I say, okay, you've crafted good visions, mission. So have you also looked, when you talk about your core values, for instance, what kind of recruitment process have you set in place to be able to extract? Because from my understanding, your core values is saying, these are like your DNA. These are the things that will help me actualize my vision and mission. So if I am the one, I should think you should focus a lot more on that to ensure that every employee you bring into the organization, do you have a recruitment process that ensure they extract those kind of qualities and ensure they have it? Because if you miss it at that point, sometimes somebody can be competent and it's not an organizational fit. And then there's be a conflict, and then you don't get the high performing team you want.
Let's take an example, right? Because this is about how can we achieve it in the workplace. Yes. You probably, as an example, set your values as empathy, and and we can even just limit, well, maybe just to be able to relate well with our listeners. Let's take an example of a company that says, oh, our core values include empathy and includes respect. And then the CEO comes out of this office, sees someone doing something, and say, shouts on the person and insults the person. Then someone's mother was sick and the staff was unable to come to work, and he did the right thing by notifying the supervisors and says that I'm unable to come. Oh, no, he has to get back to the office right away because we have emergencies to do. It's not what you write. It's what you do. And it's the values that you use in making decisions are your true core values. So irrespective of what you put on the board, entering into the office, or what you put in your annual report if you have one, or what you profess to be the core values of the organization, it's the things that you use in making decisions are the true core values, and those are the things that you truly must also use in hiring. Because at the end of the day, it's what's true to you. Because if you want an organization where people must work to die, because that's what matters, but you say something else, where you hire people who have the values other than the one that you truly profess, there's not going to be a fit.
Definitely. It then occurred to me as we were speaking, when you talk about, employer, it's just like employer branding. It's a total experience where you're talking about practice what I do and actually not what I say. A lot of organizations, just like Doctor has mentioned, actually want people to practice what they say, what they have on the board, but sometimes it's not aligned with what they do. So you find that there's a mismatch, and then there is obviously a problem. And so at any point in time, it is imperative for organizations to ensure that what they say or what they put on the board actually also match with what they do. Because if you don't do that, you're not building a very good culture. And we could go back to our children at home. I tell people the home is a reflection of a kind of a mini organization. And I tell people, if you look at man is a product of his experience and his environment. And sometimes I do this exercise with my daughter. I just say, what are our core values? Ironically, we've never sat down to really talk about it. But what I see is that she says everything we live for. And that's what it is. So in an organization too, at leadership all the way down, if you practice what you say, then it becomes like a DNA of all the people within the organization, and then can help you drive and achieve all your organizational vision.
And so, to bring that to how it affects the organization, is that when people are recruited, they recruit usually based on what is true to them.
Yeah.
But if what is true to them is different from what they've written down, they already have a misfit.
A big one.
And that's usually, that happens a lot of times, because when most times the CEO maybe does the final interview for certain roles, and he's looking for the killer, he's looking for, he's looking for that thing. So he's going to be using what's true to him in doing it. So he brings that person on board, and that person comes and people are doing something, he uses abusive language on them, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that all CEOs have values different from what they profess, but we're talking about where there's misalignment. Yes. And we're trying to identify what could be, the causes of those misalignments. And that's probably one of the sources of misalignments, where the values that are professed are different from the values that truly drive the organization. And there was a book I read, I can't remember the title of the book now, but that was many years ago. And the question was, why was this bank established? Now, not a Nigerian bank, and I'm also not going to mention the name of the country. Why was this bank established? That sounded like a foolish question. Why are banks established? But it ended up being a very important question in the context, because the bank at the time, that particular bank in the foreign land, was established to facilitate specific transactions, specific, detailed, specific, transactions in certain areas. And so it was sitting on a pyramid, and you see the bank, but the bank was being used to do so many other things, which was in the interest of its owners. And those things, if you go and put your money in at the time, you think it's just a bank, but it wasn't just a bank, it was a special purpose vehicle.
So, if I will add to that, what I then see is this, which is quite also fundamentally wrong sometimes with organization, is that we tend to use a one-size-fits-all kind of approach in our recruitment.
Okay.
Even in terms of what the parameters for evaluating people are. Based on what you said in terms of that bank, for instance, I would assume that the requirement of the kind of people they want should be specific to the kind of things they want to drive. So I usually tell organizations what works for Mr. Hay in their recruitment process would not necessarily work for you. I feel that recruitment should be customized in terms of addressing your own specific requirements, especially also from time to time, because our values, expectations, and what we want change from time to time in response to the environment. So a recruitment process you've been used, let's say 5 years ago, might not necessarily serve your purpose today, because what you're looking for in your people today was not what you're looking for in 5 years ago. So I think also organizations should be very specific in terms of the kind of processes, methodology they put in place to employ people to reflect the goals and expectations they also want to achieve.
And also, talking about the recruitment process, you said something about what works today might not have worked 5 years ago at all. So when it comes to ranks, qualifications, which one is more important? A candidate's qualifications or the ability to grow and adapt on the job?
Well, I think that's a very tricky question. In theory, people will tell you the competence, qualification. But from experience, I would rather prefer someone that can adapt and grow on the job. Why that is, it tells me somebody who's willing to learn, somebody who is open to a lot of new things. Because especially also depending on the level of the role. I was once in a training recently last week, and somebody asked me which is more important, just like you're asking, competence or loyalty. And I said, well, do you want the theory or the practical answers? And I said, theoretically, you talk about competence. But in practical terms, if I'm looking for people at managerial leadership level, my focus won't be on competence, because I will have assumed that is taken for granted. I will be focused more on loyalty.
A competent, loyal person.
Yes.
That's a great job.
Oh, yes, it has to.
Okay.
Because obviously, I would assume that for you to be able to get to that level, to a large extent, you have some level of competence. Then I will look for loyalty. So I'm just trying to say that, those questions, it could be neither here or there.
And there's a clear distinction, so we know, between a competent, loyal person and a loyal, competent person.
Yeah.
Let's, for the benefit of everybody.
So, we are not going to break that down today because of time. But in terms of, because your question was about loyalty or competence, and at that level, and like you said, you would rather look for someone that is loyal. Loyal to who? Loyal to the organization, not loyal to individual. All right? So, but it is assumed that competence is there. Because if you have competence and no loyalty to the organization, you are building nothing. It's on sinking sand. And if you are loyal and you have no competence, you are worse.
Yeah.
Therefore, at that level, a competent, loyal person to to the organization is desirable. But back to the question, would you submit yourself to someone that you have learned about their skills, that, oh, they're a great surgeon, the person is a great surgeon, but doesn't have medical training? Would you?
Okay. Well, how did you even call it with grace?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
people, quackery, you
Yes,
could have
quack.
learned. You can hear this.
There's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of
Yeah.
legal people.
Yeah, never went to school, never learned it, but it's good on the job. Would you submit yourself for surgery So that is why qualification should be taken for granted. That this role is defined as an engineering role. Therefore, the qualification is that you have a degree in engineering. So we're not going to say, oh, you have experience in engineering. No, first is you must have that degree, and then you will have certain experience to demonstrate capability. So that question as to which is more important, I think it's an irrelevant question in hiring, because it's a combination of both that matters. If they say that the role is for general counsel for the office, for the company, you are looking for a lawyer, the person must first of all have gone through university. Not only that, must have gone to the law school. That's when experience will now count. But someone who comes to you and says, oh, I have this experience, I worked in this firm and that firm and that firm, but I'm a paralegal, but I've worked with everybody. Would you hire them?
Well, how about maybe in entry-level roles?
No, I think he has also said something. When we talked about strategic hiring, it's a combination of so many things. It is expected, if you are strategically hiring people, for instance, every role within the organization, you will have clearly specified what are the requirements for those roles. And then it is assumed that even before you consider anybody for that role, they meet those minimum qualifications. And that's based on my own assumption for answering the question. And so you will find that for even minimum at the entry level, it is expected that before I even consider you to say, I want to take you as an accountant, for instance, there are basic job profile that has been clearly set out, where we talk about the skills, the qualification and all that. And that becomes what I use to even shortlist you for that role. So it supposes that you already have those basic qualifications. Then we'll take it from that point to begin to look for other things that can now make you be fitted into the organization. I don't know whether
What separates you from others?
Yes.
Why are you the ideal candidate?
Yes, that's it.
Because the word is ideal candidate, actually. That's who is most suited for this role of all the people out there.
So what's now the metrics for measuring a highly performing team?
It's the simplest thing is the result. But when we say result is not only financial, right? Result is really about what was the strategic trust. So for instance, if you say that you want to have a 10% growth at the end of 2025, what is the result that you would measure at the end of 2025? 10% growth. If you don't have 10% growth at the end of 2025, collectively, you have not achieved. You have not achieved what you set out to achieve. You might have achieved a lot. You might have probably even done 8.9%, but you haven't done the 10%. But now let's assume that you said you wanted to do 10% growth and you did 60% growth. You have outperformed that growth. But if in that same trust, you said we'll do 10% growth in sales and we will have this kind of customer experience, and then you don't measure that customer experience to be able to see whether you got it, then you have not measured everything completely.
Okay. I think just to add to what he said, I believe that the way to measure metrics or whatever is to first set a SMART goal, which is extremely critical. And at the beginning of a particular period, and those expected deliverables are well set. He has mentioned a few to say, okay, for instance, we're saying we want to grow by this, it will. Now, I'm one of also the people that feels that even our present performance metrics in the workplace in Nigeria, going forward, will have to change. And what do I mean by that? Because I feel, from my little experience, within the workplace in Nigerian context, work or performance is measured more with time, in terms of I come to work, I do 8 hours of work, and then with that, I have really worked. But now that, whether we like it or I tell people, employers will have to pay more. We don't have a choice in the Nigerian situation. What is going to change is how do I measure performance? And performance are going to be tied more to deliverables, unlike what it is right now, where employees just assume that I come to work and at the end of the month, I get X paid. Now, I see going forward, employers begin to change their performance metrics to reflect more of key deliverables in terms of quantifiable things, then to say, because it is only when we do that, we can begin to see it reflect in the growth of the organization. Because the present methodology a lot of organizations are using right now, between me and you, it can't work for the future.
Wow.
It's changing already. I mean, the gig economy, you have people sitting down in Lagos and working for companies in Poland and all of that. They don't get paid by time, they get paid by output.
Yes,
Simple.
by result.
So that's what I say is going to happen. And I tell a lot of employees I know that the earlier they begin to change their mentality, because I feel, I might be wrong, because a lot of people feel, some of us entrepreneurs, they feel we're being unfair to employees. I say they have an entitlement mentality in Nigeria. Because I see, and why do I say that? I've seen people move from a Nigerian environment and then go to the UK. And I see their work pattern changes because their pay is based on deliverables. So if you are supposed to be at work for 8 in the UK and you're supposed to clock in and you clock in by 8:15, automatically the machine deducts your pay. It's not, And so you see, and that's why if you call people abroad, the possibility of them picking calls is very slim. But in Nigeria, people spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes on personal calls when companies are paid for the 8 hours they're supposed to be at work. And then they expect the relative times that the company should grow and then they should get more money. It won't work in the future. It's not going to happen.
Sensing trouble in the future, though.
No, I think the future is even going to be better because it will reward people who perform.
Yes, that's the way to go. And organization. I mean, for me, I think as an employee, I'd rather elect to be paid based on performance. You get more.
Yeah. And we do that a lot in SOL. I mean, we have thousands of our folks who are performance-based employees, and I don't think there's anything you can offer them to take different kinds of employment, because they do 5 times, 10 times what their colleagues would take in other jobs.
Yeah, that's the way it should go.
I think our time is really running fast, but where do we go from here? High performance teams. What do we tell our organizations? What do we tell the employees? What do we tell the employers as well?
Okay, I hope I can go first. I think for me, based on my own personal experience, I think that is based on majorly 5 cardinal principles. The first one we've talked about, whereby you have to strategically hire. The second one is also what I call effective onboarding of the people when they come in. And of course, you have to have a continuous learning and development kind of organizational structure. Then, of course, you have to have a performance culture embedded in your team. And then you have to be very particular about the team dynamics you put in place in an organization. I feel if you have a mix of these 5 major cardinal principles, the chances that your employees will definitely be able to move that needle as expected.
Thank you very much, sir.
And I think all I should just say is thank you so much, for that beautiful summary. And thank you for coming on Whispers today. And we look forward to having you soon again.
Well, it's always a pleasure for me, particularly to try and give back. It's something I'm very passionate about, and that's why I'm involved in a lot of training in so many organizations and in so many management schools, and so it's always a privilege. So I will definitely be very interested to come back here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much as well for listening to this episode of Workplace Whispers. Do well to like, subscribe, and follow us on our YouTube channels at SOL Nigeria. That's where you find us on YouTube. And please comment. Let us know what you feel about this conversation. Thank you again. It's Workplace Whispers.